Welcome back. Good to have you along. As always, you're watching Ozarks Tonight. I'm David Oliver. You can see we are honored to be joined tonight here on the broadcast by Missouri's senior Senator Roy Blunt, who hails, of course, from right here in Southwest Missouri, joining us tonight from our nation's capital. Senator Blunt, good to see you, sir.
Hey, David, good to see you, and good to be with you.
Well, you know, you and I have done interviews for a lot of years together, never like this. First of all, I want to ask you how you're doing. What's life look like for you out there in D.C. right now?
Well, you know, this is all pretty uncharted territory, and I chair the committee that funds many of the agencies that people are getting familiar with in ways they never have before. The Health and Human Services, the group in there that deals with hospitals through Medicare and Medicaid, the National Institute of Health, Dr. Fauci, who everybody has gotten familiar with as one of the double handful of agency directors in the NIH, which has been one of my principal projects in the last several years, is to increase our health resources funding, the Center for Disease Control. So I'm on calls with many of them all the time. Just yesterday, Senator Alexander from Tennessee and I had a 30-minute call with Dr. Birx, or Dr. Birx rather, and Dr. Hahn at CDC to talk about future testing, particularly that testing that might tell people who have had this and don't know that they've had it, that one, they've had it, and hopefully by the time you're telling them that, we'll know whether there's a likelihood that if you've had it, you're probably immune between now and the time we'd have a vaccine available a year or so from now. Certainly that would help if the scientific estimates are right, and maybe as many as 1 out of 5 Americans have had COVID-19, and they don't know for sure. They know that they've had it. They know that they were sick for a couple of days. They didn't meet the criteria to get the test to see if they had it. It'd be helpful to know if you could re-engage in the community. That's the kind of discussion that I'm in all the time, including discussions with all our manufacturing groups in Missouri and business and other groups in Missouri that are job providers.
You mentioned testing there, Senator Blunt, and I know Governor Mike Parsons shared with me during our interview that we conducted earlier this week that he shared with you and the other federal delegation from Missouri, I believe on Tuesday this week, that he wants to see more testing supplies coming to Missouri from the federal government. He's concerned about that. How are you all working to make that a reality for the governor in his request?
Well, we're trying to be sure that on this new test that would see if you'd had the disease or not. Remember, the tests we've had up till now just kind of tell you if you have it at the time you're tested. If you took the test 2 days earlier or 2 weeks later, you might have a different result from the current test we've had, which has just simply been diagnostic. The other test we want to work on is the test that lets people know that they've had it, and hopefully with some assurance that if you've had it, you can't get it again. We're working to get those available in the tens of millions over the next few months to as many as maybe 200 million of those tests available by Labor Day. It's my view that the government, in being willing to pay for the diagnostic test, would also pay for that test. And certainly one of the things Governor Parsons is most concerned about is the safest, surest way to get our economy back to where it's as close to fully functioning as we can safely have it. And we certainly talked about that with a delegation-wide call just a few days ago.
You know, I should, in full disclosure, tell our viewers we're taping this at 1 o'clock Central Time today before we hear from the president or the governor today. But there's a lot of talk happening this week about how to best reopen the states, reopen our country, our economy. Let me ask you, what do you think is the best path forward, given some of the data that you're seeing out there and some of the committees you're a part of?
I think the best path forward is to understand that we're a big, diverse country. And we need to open up in ways that are likely regional, maybe statewide, maybe within our state, even the governor working with other elected officials to determine that 80% of the state could go back to a more normal function and 20% of the state has to wait a little longer. You know, when there was a real call on the president to make a nationwide stay-at-home order, I was opposed to that. I defended the president's view that he could give a lot of advice, but it's too big a country to do a nationwide order. I think it's equally too big a country to do a nationwide, it's time to get back out there order, though the president certainly can work with the governors, put some guidelines out there that governors could use or not as they wanted to. And I know he's talking to the governors, he and the vice president, all the time, including today, I believe. He had a meeting with the senators he's asked to help re-engage in the economy, a telephone conference I was part of this morning. And I think he's clearly come to the view in the last couple of days that working with the governors to open up state by state, and understanding that even in a state, the governors may think that part of the state is ready and part of the state is not. You know, it's a long way from the border of Arkansas to the border of Iowa. Lots of different things happen in that space.
A lot of people are getting those stimulus payments this week. Let's talk about that program, the CARES Act, the money. What do you hope that does for our country in terms of the people that are getting it? But also, what are your thoughts on the news out today that the protection, the paycheck protection part of that bill is now out of money?
Well, two separate questions. Let me answer them separately. One, on the direct payments issue, of course, that's something that people just they knew whether they were qualified for that or not before that check was deposited in their account, or some checks have to be mailed directly to them. Most of this was by direct deposit. If you're how you get your Social Security check, you might have gotten it that way. How you would have gotten your tax refund, you might have gotten it that way. At a time when families are really stressed, maybe because their work situation has changed, maybe because they have bills, child care or health care bills they didn't think they're going to have. This really, really helps. This really helps, and they're getting those checks right now. Most Missourians will get that check that would be $1,200 for one adult, often $2,400 for two adults. If between them they make less than $75,000 each a year, and you know, a traditional family with a couple of kids, that would be $3,400 coming to your account right now at a time when you need it. And then on the PPP, we are out of money today. I was on that call I mentioned with the president earlier. Secretary Mnuchin announced while we were on that call that the last of that first $350 billion has been spoken for. And clearly we need to step up now and understand, as I said would happen when we passed this bill, we need to do this in a hurry. We're not going to get everything right. And our next effort should be to correct the things we didn't get quite right. And so adding money to that program that's already out of money is something that's really important that we do, and that we do it as quickly as we can.
Let me ask you another question as well about a couple of big industries here in Missouri that are being pretty hard hit by this pandemic in our country: agriculture and tourism. You know, here in the Ozarks we have Branson. It's shut down right now at a time when you've got, normally you'd have a lot of tourists and money flowing in. Agriculture taking a hit. I know you have a specific concern for dairy farmers. What can we do at the federal level, if anything, to help those two particular factors in our economy?
Well, they're the two biggest factors in our economy where we live. Those are the number one and two in some order economic drivers in our state. We put about $14.5 billion in for agriculture loans and agricultural assistance of various kinds. It's a little too early to tell whether that's the right number or not. On tourism, there's so many different structures of the tourist industry. A lot of tourism is people who have fewer than 500 employees. Maybe they have 5 employees. They will qualify for that paycheck protection application. I had a conversation call yesterday with the theme parks, including Silver Dollar City, from all over the country, representatives of those theme parks. They have a huge, huge problem. You know, not only are they all closed right now, but they have to worry a lot about whether the season where they make almost all of their income coming up, whether people are going to be ready to re-engage in that kind of environment or not. And we need to be sure we're helping them figure out the best way that they can make that part of that economy work. We want people to safely be able to re-engage in the economy as quickly as they can. Tourism, travel, restaurants, all those things have to have customers if those industries are going to survive. There's no way you can really have that same experience unless you're personally present. We're working to see how we can encourage safe interaction in those things that are so important to our state and frankly to the country, David.
Senator Blunt, in closing, I guess I just want to ask you kind of a personal question. You've been a leader in our state for a very long time, and I think people are looking to leaders like yourself right now for some guidance. And I've asked this question of others who've come on the broadcast with me. What do you say to people here in our state who are perhaps scared, they're worried, they're uncertain about what our future may look like?
Well, I think we have the great fortune of living in the greatest country in the world with an economy that was by far the strongest economy in the world, and probably still is. Other economies are lagging behind ours. We're innovative, we're flexible. We're going to beat this. We have two fights going on right now. One is the fight against the virus. The other is the fight for the economy. We're going to figure out how to win both of those fights, and we're going to try to do it in a way that the most people have the most opportunity to emerge from these particular battles in better shape than they would if we weren't collectively working together to see that all happens.
Missouri Senior Senator Roy Blunt joining us from our nation's capital. Mr. Blunt, I really appreciate your time and your staff making this technology work for us today, and I know our viewers appreciate hearing from you, sir. Thank you for your time.
It's a good time to have great staff and great ways to communicate, so thanks for giving us the time tonight, David.
Okay, we'll see you soon. We'll have more Ozarks tonight after this quick break.